Kate, tell me what the Turtle Care Center at the South Carolina Aquarium does to rehabilitate turtles.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Sea Turtle Care Center is the only facility in the state of South Carolina that rehabilitates sick and injured sea turtles that are found here on our waterways or in our coastlines. And so we bring them in, we help them get healthier, and our goal is to release every patient back into the wild.
And you're getting, I'm guessing, patients from all over. Are they typically from the Southeast or do they come from all over?
They are typically from South Carolina, all over our state, but we do help out the Southeast and the Northeast as well. We will help out the New England area. We have some partners up there. They have what's called a cold stunning event in the fall and into the winter, where a lot of sea turtles will strand on the Cape Cod beaches and some other beaches in New York and in the Northeast, and they get inundated with patients. So we're a huge sea turtle community here in the United States, and so we all help each other out. And some of their patients will be flown down to us if we have tanks that are open, and we'll help them out. So this winter, we did take 15 sea turtles from the Massachusetts area.
Wow. What type of turtles are you getting?
So we typically see 3 to 4 different species of sea turtle off of our South Carolina coastline. We see loggerhead sea turtles. They're our most common nesting species of sea turtle that we have here. We see Kemp's Ridleys, green turtles, and then leatherbacks will actually migrate off of our coast as well.
Wow. What kind of
Yeah.
ailments are they coming in with? What typically are the injuries?
So sea turtles that strand here in South Carolina are typically coming in with something. So we try to divide that up between human impacts or human threats and natural causes of stranding. So we see a lot of boat strike related injuries, unfortunately, hook and line interactions where sometimes these sea turtles get caught on a hook, and if they swallow it, they may need a surgical procedure to remove that hook. We'll also see plastic and marine debris ingestion. And then we'll also see something called debilitated turtle syndrome, which is basically just a starvation state that these sea turtles are in. We're not always sure why or what causes it, but sometimes there could be a human impact that causes them to become debilitated and then they strand. Other times, there's not always a reason for it. And then in the winter months, as I just mentioned, we do have cold stunning, which is hypothermia in sea turtles as well.
Yeah, I just spoke to somebody from the Manatee Center in Florida recently about weather impacts
Yeah.
on manatees. So turtles are also dealing with weather impacts. What's the relationship there? What can go wrong?
So sea turtles are reptiles, which means they're cold-blooded animals. And so they rely on the temperature of their environment and the temperature of the air to produce their body heat. So when a sea turtle, it may migrate up, let's say, to the northeast, where in the summertime there's great foraging for them, there's great prey items for them to eat. But because the ocean is staying warmer for a longer period of time up there, they're missing that environmental cue to swim or migrate south, and then they end up being stranded and they're at the mercy of the current and the winds, and that water temperature up there will slowly decline, and then they become sicker and sicker every day, and they eventually strand with hypothermia, where they're then exposed to even colder air temperatures, and they're kind of trying to race the clock for somebody to find them so that they can then be transported to facilities up there and be stabilized and treated. And so that's kind of something that we're seeing happen more frequently. We have large cold fronts come through where, say, it's been warmer, meaning like in the 70s or even in the 60s, and then it plunges down into the 30s and 20s. A lot of our green sea turtles in this area like to forage in our salt marsh and tidal areas and tributaries, and that area is such a shallow volume of water that it cannot hold that water temperature for too long when that temp drops, and so they'll become cold stunned in those areas as well. So we'll see that here in South Carolina. It's definitely happening in the southeast and the Gulf states as well.
Yeah, I can imagine the extremes in temperature they're confusing to us. I can imagine they're very confusing
Yeah.
to animals. What other impacts on the turtles from climate change? So what is climate change doing to impact these turtles as far as, say, beach erosion or those
Yeah.
extreme temperatures or algae blooms?
Yeah, so I'm not going to speak too much to the algal blooms. We don't typically have that issue here in South Carolina like they experience down in Florida, but we do see more frequent severe weather, larger hurricane systems coming through and impacting our area more frequently. And what that causes is lots of problems. It can cause beach erosion, as you mentioned. So if the sea turtles are nesting May through, August, September, It takes a nest approximately 45 to 60 days to incubate. And so during that time, if there's a large storm that it doesn't even have to be a direct hit, it can just brush by our coast, can cause higher tides to wash over those nests and they can drown. It can cause erosion of our beaches, which results in a loss of nesting area for these sea turtles. And then we see a lot more flooding, even downtown here in Charleston. It doesn't even have to be a storm; it can be a high tide, a king tide, that can cause major flooding. And if you hit it at the same time as a storm, it can be very problematic. So we see that problem for these sea turtles as they're nesting. They're kind of losing some of that critical nesting habitat that they need.
What about light pollution? Because
Yeah.
development along the beach seemed to be an issue for many years. Is light pollution still a problem when it comes to turtle nesting?
Yeah, artificial lighting can definitely be an issue for sea turtles. So when the sea turtles are coming up onto the beach, there's some species that are unbothered by that because they'll nest during the day. There's two species that do that, but here in South Carolina, we mainly have loggerheads and greens, and sometimes we have chems as well. But our main nester are loggerhead sea turtles, and so they're going to be coming up onto the beach typically under the cover of darkness. And so if an animal or a female loggerhead is coming up to nest and they see a flashlight or they see your phone, they might do what's called a false crawl. And what that means is that they'll use all that energy to come up, decide that that area is not safe for their nest, and then go back into the ocean, which may result in them nesting in a less favorable location. More importantly, for the hatchlings, when they emerge from that nest, they want to go toward the area where the brightest spot over the horizon should be the ocean, the moonlight, whatever that is. But they may instead get disoriented and head toward that parking lot light or your phone or your flashlight. And that would make that then reduces their chances of survival because they're not going into the ocean. So, those are some impacts that we're seeing how that impacts sea turtles. So it's best if there's red flashlights at night on the beach or no light if you're going to be out on the beach during our nesting season.
I've heard a lot of different numbers thrown around when it comes to the hatchlings and how many
Yeah.
survive to adulthood. Can you give me specific, correct
Yeah.
information on that?
Yeah. So it kind of depends on the scientist or the biologist that you're talking to. We typically say that about 1 in 1,000 hatchlings are estimated to make it to adulthood. And that's accounting for just natural threats to sea turtles. But when you account human threats, it can be anywhere from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 10,000, which significantly reduces their chance of making it to adulthood. Something that a lot of people don't understand about sea turtles is that it takes roughly 30 years or so for them to reach adult maturity. That does vary by species, but on average, about 30 years is when they're considered reproductively mature. And so they kind of have to run that gauntlet of life. And then when you throw human impacts into that mix, it just reduces their chance of survival even lower.
What is it like to release the turtles back into the wild? What is that process like, and can people watch it?
Yeah, yeah. So sea turtle releases are definitely that's like the best day. It means a lot of people put a lot of time and hard work into helping these turtles get healthy and fully rehabilitate. And that day is just that accumulation of all of that hard work for them. And so releases happen here. We typically in the warmer months, we will summertime typically we will release locally off of our beaches, or we work with the Department of Natural Resources who permits us to do this job and this work, to identify some really great release locations for them if we can't do a beach release. And then if it's cold during the winter months, we will actually either take them offshore to the Gulf Stream, which is where they would be had they made it out, or we'll drive them south to Florida, where it's a lot warmer and the Gulf Stream's a little bit closer. So that's kind of how those parameters go. We sometimes have public releases if it's right for the individual animal, and that would typically happen in the summer. But we do live stream the majority of our releases. So if you can't be there in person or we don't have a public release, you can at least watch it from our social media channels.
And what can folks around the country do to help the well-being of turtles in the future?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. So, I like to leave people with a sense of something that they can do to contribute to help with not just sea turtles, but all wildlife. if we're part of the issue, we can be part of that solution as well. So things that we like to tell folks is, if you are not already doing these small actions in your life, small actions lead to large change, especially when you have a lot of people doing them. So using reusable shopping bags when you can, reusable water bottles where you can in your life, and kind of reducing your use of single-use plastic really helps to help sea turtles and other wildlife. And then if you have a nonprofit, like here at the aquarium, we're a nonprofit and we do a lot of conservation beyond our walls. If you go into those facilities and support them, that really goes a long way. That's how we're able to help take care of our patients and support our mission of other conservation efforts as well.